Lawn care, I treat like property management, and I always have two. I don't ever have one lawn care guy or company that's doing all of my properties. I always make sure that I've got two people involved. And the reason is I've had companies just literally disappear overnight, and the next day you can't find them, and the tenants are calling and complaining. And so it's one of those categories that you don't want to be without someone. And so I always have two going at one time, which means if someone happens to disappear or lands in the hospital or something, I've already got a backup. Lawn cares in most areas, I feel like is fairly competitive. And so if you find the guys who are working with property management companies, their rates are probably going to be reasonably the same. Like they might vary by $10 a property or something, but their rates are probably going to be reasonably the same. The one thing I've done to save expense there is my investment properties get mowed twice a month. They don't get mowed every other week or every week. They literally get mowed twice a month. And I've just been crystal clear on that over the span of the summer, which is like in Wichita is a 4 to 5 month season. It saves me 2 mows. And so I don't care if it's $10 more a mow, because I'm literally saving 2 mows by saying we're mowing twice a month. We're not mowing every other week. And so that would be one way where I would say you could save cost, is just really think through what's the least amount of mowing that this property could handle before an HOA complained, or before I feel like I'm being a horrible property owner, and mow that amount. The other thing about lawn care is obviously most of the time that's a tenant expense. In my area, it's a landlord expense when we're talking about multifamilies, right? So I've got a quad and a duplex, and that's where my lawn care contract comes in play. And then also I've got 2 midterm properties, and all the utilities and exterior maintenance is included on those 30 to 90-day contracts. But having someone that is consistently receiving money from you as an investor is super helpful, because when a property goes vacant, you need somebody that's going to be willing to jump and go mow a property, because it's going to be vacant for a month while you're getting it turned. And if you don't have someone that you're steadily providing work to, the chances of you finding someone that's going to be willing to go and pick up that 1 or 2, that property that needs mowed 1 or 2 or 3 times until you get the next tenant in place at a reasonable rate is probably pretty slim to none. So I'm a fan of, I would say if you don't have investment properties that need a steady mow all summer, then you probably need to just partner with an investor that does, and let the lawn care guy start to know your name in correlation with X, Y, and Z properties that they're already mowing. Because we all need someone to do that job if one of our properties turns, and we've got a time period involved before the next tenant is in place, right? Like you have to have lawn care in the summer. I don't worry about, same vein as lawn care, I don't personally worry about snow removal and or de-icing or any of that. There's a chance that may eventually come back to bite me in the butt, but even on my midterm properties, in the winter, I set a shovel on the front porch and a bag of salt, and I just call it good. So I don't pay for that in the winter, but I do pay for lawn care in the summer where it's necessary. Do you have much experience, Sheldon, on like, I know you've got investment properties, but do you help with any of this interim stuff with your other investors, or you tend to just kind of let them do their own thing?
No, I do. I work up a list. We do have a list of a lot of these vendors already. Some of them not as good as others.
Yeah.
And we've had to push people off the list and that kind of stuff, just because stuff happens. I would say the lawn mowing one's the most interesting one, at least around here. In the spring, it's usually you got to mow like once a week kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you can sometimes get away with 2 weeks. We try to do it that way as well, just like you said. But it's some days or some weeks it's just it grows too fast.
Yeah. Well,
And we
so
just
I
haven't
mean, and
found.
so I'd say for that one, if it really needs mowed every week, right? Then let's just say we're mowing 3 times a month. You're mowing every 10 days, and the extra 2 or 3 days isn't going to kill anyone. And still we're saving a mow every single month.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. No, I agree with that. And I think too, I found it pretty hard to find good, at least so far. I need to talk to a few people about that, but yeah, that I ended up having to go mow one of my yards the other week just because convinced the next door neighbor to mow it for me for a couple bucks.
Nice.
So that wasn't too bad, but
One piece of advice that I would say, and it's easier said than done. I've got a high school kid. This is his second summer mowing, and he's got all of my properties except one this year. Again, just because I have a rule of no one can have all my properties. Like I have to split, but it's his second year doing it. We got him last year. He was mowing the neighbor's yard, and we watched him, and we watched that he showed up. You could tell he was showing up on a schedule, same date, same time, right? Like he was showing up on a schedule. And so we went and asked him what was going on and if he'd be interested in mowing ours. And that slowly budded into a relationship where now he's got, I think, 5 of my properties. And so I'm a big fan for a runner's perspective. I'm a big fan of the stay-at-home mom model, and for lawn mowing, I'm a big fan of the high school kid who wants to work hard and is motivated. But I recognize that that's easier said than done to actually find somebody who will do that sometimes.
yeah, yeah.
And the problem with him this year is he went and got a full-time job, so he's mowing on Saturdays and Sundays, which is fine. Like it has worked out completely fine, but I feel like I could have made 3 phone calls and probably handed him 20 extra properties this year, and he literally can't handle the volume because he's got a full-time job. So there's that. And then I know there will be the year that he tells me that he's going to college and I'll get to replace him. But that's why I have my guy mowing my other property, because I've already got a backup, a bench in place. Painters and roofers. Painters, well, let's just do painters, roofers, and handyman. Painters, I have found, are an easy way to save money. Having a paint crew versus lumping painting in with the general handyman or the contractor bid. Having a separate paint crew that comes out and bids just the paint, I would say saves me on average 10 to 25% on the cost of painting the house or whatever, however much it is that needs to be painted. And it's really interesting. Sometimes I've literally just taken the painter's bid and handed it back to the general handyman and said, like, we're either going to need to cross the painting off your list or you're going to have to come back and match this price, which has worked reasonably well. But painters work cheaper and because they get because they have a specialty, right? They're clear on what they do, they're clear on what they don't do, and they've got systems and processes, and they can come in and they can truly paint a kitchen in a day or two that would take a handyman a week because that handyman doesn't have the same systems and processes. So I'm a big fan of having a separate paint crew in addition to your general handyman or contractor. And I didn't have that until a couple of years ago. We just lumped that all into general handyman or general contractor services, but having an actual paint crew or 2 that can come and bid for you often can get a project started faster as well, because painters are in and out of houses in 2 or 3 or 4 days versus a general handyman, depending on the project, they might be locked up in a house for a month. And so having a paint crew that can come and get started before the general handyman can come and do all of their stuff can be money really well spent. Along the veins of painters, I'm also a big fan of having your own swatches, like what colors you're recommending for your investors to paint based off of the size of the house, right? I've seen some pretty small dark living rooms, and so we can't go with dark gray as that color palette, but within reason and with just a couple of color swatches, you should pretty easily be able to say this is the brand of paint, this is the grade of paint. Here's our colors. If you're painting trim, that's the color that I want. And just from a systems approach, it makes it 4 or 5 years down the road. Now everything's smooth and you're not having to repaint an entire room if only one wall needed repainted. It makes touch-ups make a lot more sense. And if you use the same paint crew enough, my paint crew is willing to save paint in between jobs because they know I hand them about a project every single month. And so they'll store my 5-gallon or 10-gallon buckets or however big those 5 gallons, however big those buckets are, they'll store them and take them to the next job for me, which I mean, really, truly probably saves me $300 or $400 a year versus buying new paint for every single job. So I'm a fan of that. Roofers, when you have found your roofer that's cheaper than everyone else, and every market has one of those, when you found that guy, I'm a big fan of just giving him everything. Because my own personal preference, the way I've approached real estate is there's a whole lot of stuff that I can tell is wrong or right about a rental property, and I've chosen to never learn how to look at roofs. And so I pretty well always have a roofer go out and look at a roof if we've had a bad hailstorm or if we've had, if I'm getting ready to purchase a new investment property, like I want a roofer to go and look and say, is this good? Is there enough for an insurance claim? Is there $400 worth of repairs or are the nail heads popping up showing that there's some sort of a defect, right? Like there's just a whole lot of stuff about roofs that I personally have chosen never to look at and never to learn how to look at. So for roofers, when you found that guy that's cheaper than everybody else, when you found the guy that will meet an insurance adjuster out at the property and will help you get the right value that you should get for the roof, and then turn around and not charge you the deductible that the insurance company is assuming that you're paying for part of that roof. When you found that guy, I'm just a big fan of, as much as possible, hand all your business to one guy, to one roofing company, so that they'll be willing to come and do can you go check out these 3 roofs at your convenience this week? And that's one of those, there's a lot of give and takes. Apparently, I mean, it feels like there has to be a lot of money involved in roofing, because there have been times that I'm handing a roofer maybe 2 jobs a month and they're going and looking at 6 or 7 additional roofs for me every single month. And that seems to be a win-win for them. So that's a relationship that's worked really well for me. Have you had any other thoughts on or experiences with roofers?
Yeah, roofers are tough in this area, at least it's northeast area. And I don't know, because we get a lot of rubber roofs, so flat rubber roofs as well, and some pitched, a lot of pitch too. But we seem to, if we find a good contractor, they're usually great for about a year, and then they're too busy and their prices go up, and they just are doing a great job, but then their prices go up and it becomes not worth it. And so we've seen just a lot of turnover because of that, I guess, kind of in contractors in general, but roofers being a big part of that.
Okay, sweet. So then in your area, it's exactly the opposite. You would for sure have to have 2 at all times, because expecting that someone's going to get so busy that their pricing is going to go up. And actually, now that you mention it, our guy that we use, his name's Jordan, but the company is Pete's Roofing. Why it's Pete's Roofing, I couldn't tell you, but his name's Jordan. And I don't know why his pricing hasn't gone up. We called him last month because there was an active leak on a roof, and luckily it was an insurance claim. Insurance paid for about 80% of the roof, which is fine by me. I could definitely afford the other 20%. And we have such a good long-standing relationship with him that he bumped us ahead of 11 other roofs because we had an active leak, and we basically were like begging, like, this is insane, and it's going to cost us thousands of extra dollars. And I get it, it's my fault. Like I should have figured this out about this roof sooner, but like, what can we do here? He bumped us ahead of 11 other roofs. And we've used him for 5 or 6 years. I have no idea why his pricing hasn't gone up, because clearly, like, if you've got a waiting list of 12 roofs, you're not hurting for projects. So why would you not raise your price? But he hasn't. So maybe you'll get lucky one day and find that guy who doesn't raise his price.
I hope so. I hope so.
I will say though, photographers are our big one that we used to always run into. You'd find that photographer who got to start because they were slightly below market value, right? And they learned how to produce a really good product for realtors. And then about on the 1 year mark, their prices would go up, which is fine. Like now they're at market value. But then about 6 months later, their pricing would go up again. And it's like, come on, dude, now I got to go find somebody else. What are you thinking? Okay, handyman, general contractor. This one, I think you have to have 3 or 4 people on your list at all times. Like, I don't even think 2 is enough to have on your list. And I recommend a mixture of both. I recommend having that guy that is a licensed general contractor, because for some jobs and some clients, you're going to need that. And then from a cost savings benefit, I recommend having the general handyman. What I'll say about the general handyman, you don't know. They seem a lot more affordable, and you won't know for 3 or 4 years if they actually were more affordable or not. So we've got we've had several repair items come in lately on properties that our general handyman repaired 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, and the product's failing because he didn't use the right product, right? Like he didn't use the right kind of treated boards for a deck. And so we're getting to replace boards on a deck that we shouldn't be replacing, but he literally didn't use the right kind of board. And that's kind of a weird, hard one to navigate. So that whole general handyman, you really just need to evaluate how much cheaper are they than a licensed contractor, and is it worth it, right? So if I can save $10,000 on a house, that probably is worth it. If I'm saving a few $100, you just really have to evaluate and try to know what you know about the handyman, but approach it with caution, I guess. Cheapest isn't always best. The other thing, lesson, I guess, that I learned that cost me several thousands of dollars is just, you've got to always verify, or have someone on your team verify that work's complete before you give that final payment. And it doesn't matter how long you've been in relationship or working with that individual. At the first sign that you're loosening up on your standards, it's just an opportunity for someone not to follow through at the level that they should. So we had a 3-year-long relationship with a contractor. Literally kept food on his family's table at the start of COVID. We had him come and work and remodel our basement for a month because we didn't have any other work we could hand him. And so I would have told you we were way past that. But there was a project that the payout was like $2,500, and he sent pictures that it was done, and my employee paid him. And when we got a complaint from the tenant and we went over to check, like, you could literally push on the window and push it, like there was zero chance he thought it was done. But he just had an opportunity to collect a payment for a job not well done, and it sucked. Like, I really don't understand it. Obviously that was the last time we ever used him. Was it really worth ending a relationship? But for whatever reason, he got it in his head that it was. So always verify that work's done before you submit final payment, because not only did it cost us that $2,500, but then we got to pay even more for someone to go back in and redo it correctly the way that it should have been done the first time.
Yeah, this is definitely a big thing. I think I can't echo that enough. We had a property management company that we worked with that didn't do that. And we I don't know how many deals it was a lot, and they figured out the way to scam them, basically, and ruined a lot of investors a little bit. But yeah, absolutely got to check that work, double check that for sure.
Crazy. It really is crazy. Okay, we're going to end a little bit early, I think. We'll talk about cleaners and inspectors. So cleaners, I really fought my property management company when they started insisting on professional cleaning before turning a rental, because their prices are ridiculous. And I still will stand behind that their prices are ridiculous. But I have learned that it really does matter. If a tenant feels like they're walking into a sparkling clean house, they really do take better care of the house than if they're walking into a reasonably clean house. That's one of those weird categories that it actually makes a ton of difference. But what I will say about cleaners is you can find the cleaning company service that will charge $350 per clean, regardless of what it is, right? And I've learned they don't do any better of a job than the cleaner who actually wants to work and charges $20 an hour. And so if you're going to go the independent cleaner route versus the company route, know that that's going to take a little bit of time management from somebody, whether that's you or somebody on your team. But there's a way to absolutely save hundreds of dollars on a clean. I would say, though, having the expense of cleaning in between before a new tenant moves in, like a professional clean, really does make all the difference in the world in how a tenant takes care of the property and the condition that they hand it back to you on. And as cheap as I am, I think that's an expense that's really well worth it. And then inspectors, I've always looked for a few things from an inspector. I want somebody that's going to be reasonably thorough, right? So I vetted a lot of new to us inspector companies that didn't pass, and we could never use them ever again. And weird things like not telling me how many panels are broken on windows. Like, yes, I understand that as a buyer, I should be able to walk around and count broken panels, but like, what's your job? What are you doing if you can't? If you think you can overlook the obvious stuff, how do I know that you're catching the non-obvious stuff? And so we've learned over the years, I've literally just had a list that I've kept. And when I vet a new inspector, I'm going down my list and I'm saying, did they count blank? Did they address blank? Did they see blank? Did they tell me about the electric panel? I've had multiple inspectors that literally didn't even take the screws off the electric panel and look to see what was right or wrong about the electric panel. And so I'm a big fan of property inspectors. I'm a fan of as agents of us taking the liability off of us, helping our clients see everything. I'd like that liability to be put on to someone else and it not be up to me to show everything that's right or wrong about a property. And then as an investor, I'm just crystal clear that I don't know everything that I don't know. And so, but finding that guy that's the correct level of thorough without being alarming to my investors, that's been kind of the hard thing. What my experience has been with inspectors is they're not willing to play ball. Like, I can't tell you the number of times that, like probably 6 to 10 times over the years, we went to our favorite inspector and said, hey dude, we give you like 80 properties a year and you help sponsor X, Y, or Z. And his answer was always no. Like, I'm just the inspector. Which always seemed weird and seemed like he wasn't being a great team player, but yet truly he was the most thorough guy that we could find. And yet he wasn't alarming and all the things. So we kept using him anyway. So I haven't necessarily found inspectors to always be team players, and the ones that are, just from my experience, the ones that are, I kind of tend to question, how good are your skills? Are you just trying to buy my client's service in the future? But maybe that's just me, and maybe that's just my experience that I've ran across. But we've for a while really only had one inspector, and then as he got really busy, he would get to where sometimes he was booked out 6 or 7 or 8 days, which just didn't work in a hot market. And so then we had a backup guy. But inspectors I have found seem to be pretty steady. Their prices don't seem to increase much over time. And so if you find a good one, you can feel free to really lean in on them.
Have you seen inspectors kind of go away over the last couple of years? I mean, over the last 2-3 years, we really weren't doing inspections. That's like the first thing everybody waves. And
Yep.
so we've actually had a couple of inspectors just quit and they just can't.
I've seen some of the good ones quit, or business just gets really challenging because of exactly the scenario that you just said. And I've seen a slew of new ones come in that aren't certified from anyone, and they absolutely shouldn't be carrying that inspector title at all. And so, yes, I've absolutely seen that. And it just makes it even a little bit more interesting and difficult to navigate. I will say if we're ever vetting a new inspector, we will not give them a shot at a property until we've seen an inspection report. Like, I don't care what personal private information you feel like you have to black out to send us one, but you better send us an example and let me see even what report you're using as kind of an indication of, am I going to be willing to give you a chance or not?
Yeah.
All right, do you think that's circling back around and people are going back more to the inspector route, or is that still being waived, and especially for inspection or for investor properties?
Still being waived, I would say. Every now and then we'll get it some, but yeah, it's still maybe 1 in 4 deals.
Okay. Yeah. And all I would say for that then is just make sure, from an agent perspective, make sure your disclosures are clear about what the investor is, what responsibility the investor is taking on, and that you're not taking on any of that responsibility. I'm always been super happy. I'll point out as many things as I can possibly point out, but I'm not responsible for what I miss. Like, my job is to show you what I can show you, but I'm not responsible for what I miss. And I think, if I'm being honest with you, that's part of why I never learned to look at roofs. Because at the end of the day, you can tell if it's a really bad roof from the ground, you can tell that, but there's no guarantee from the ground that you can tell that roof's fine. It's just something that you may not be able to see.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on any of this list, or any other questions? Sorry, it kind of whittled down to just you.
No, that's totally fine. Totally fine. I would say one thing. So I just took that list, made my own copy, but lenders are a big thing. We have commercial, residential. I have foreign investors as well. So that's another one. And then hard money lenders as well. Now, I know that's 4 different types of lending, but all are very unique in themselves.
Yep.
But
it's been
definitely
a whole class talking about lenders. So yes, I totally agree with you on that. And it's funny to me how many, and I would say this is a threshold of, are you equipped with working with investors or not? But it's funny to me how many agents have literally sold hundreds of deals and they've never heard of commercial lending for residential investment properties. Yeah. DSCR is another product that I'm sure you're super familiar with that is growing in popularity. And I've got a client that's using it now. She would have never been able to buy the investment property because her accountant went kind of MIA and she hasn't filed last year's taxes. Like, literally never would have been able to qualify for a regular conventional loan, and probably not a commercial loan either. But everything's going just fine with the DSCR loan. So they serve their purposes too. And you pay for it in a different way, but that's been a really helpful tool to learn a little bit more about. Totally agree with you on that. And then I also spent a whole class talking about property management companies. They can make or break, and they'll make or break whether or not you're successful as an investor.
I can't express that one enough. That comment is 100% true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Holly, I have a question.
Yes.
Circling back to cleaners, do you require that your cleaners also be licensed? Not licensed.
So if it's a company, for sure.
Okay.
If it's a company, absolutely. If it's anyone that even remotely brands as a company, absolutely. To be honest with you, Tony, most of my non-company cleaners, I have a personal relationship with, and I don't care. I really don't care. I do care that they have filled out a W-9 and I can pay them as an independent contractor. But other than that, I personally don't care. And there's a chance that will eventually come back and bite me in the butt. But if I'm being honest, I feel like that's why I have an umbrella insurance policy, and that's part of just that protection and that peace of mind. All right, we're going to wrap it up a little bit early then. I appreciate y'all being here.